At my sister's wedding, Dad said. You'll never amount to anything like her. I smiled, clinked my glass, and announced something that made the whole room freeze. They say every family has a favorite. In ours, it was never a secret. I remember the first time I realized I was invisible. I was 6, and my sister Caroline was 8, standing on a stool in the kitchen holding a spelling bee trophy. Mom took 100 photos. Dad said she was a genius. I had just gotten a perfect score on a math test and held the paper out like a peace offering. He didn't even glance at it. That moment set the tone for the rest of my life. Caroline was the pride of the family. The golden child. First violin in the school orchestra, valedictorian, Ivy League with a full ride. She made everything look effortless. It didn't matter that I got a scholarship too, just not that scholarship. It didn't matter that I was building something real, something mine. I never fit the mold of what they wanted. And Dad, he never let me forget it. But I never gave them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I kept quiet, kept working, and I disappeared from their view. It was easier that way. The less they saw, the less they could tear down. Until the wedding. Caroline was marrying Charles Whitman, yes, that Whitman family. The country club lineage. The "We summer in Maine" kind. The invitation arrived with gold lettering and a return address that smelled like generational wealth. I RSVP'd yes. Polished my shoes. Bought a suit that fit. No +1. No dramatic entrance. Just me, calm, put together, and very, very quiet. I hadn't seen most of them in over a year. They didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. The ceremony was picture perfect. Caroline looked radiant. Charles had that bland, toothpaste commercial charm. My parents were glowing like they just won the lottery. I stayed in the background, sipping champagne and pretending not to exist. It was a game I'd mastered. But the reception, that's where things turned. It was after the third round of toasts. The DJ was queuing up the next playlist. Laughter filled the tent. And then my father stood up, glass in hand, and cleared his throat. I felt it before I heard it, the tension tightening like a wire. I just want to say, he began, how proud I am of my daughter. Caroline, you've always exceeded every expectation. Grace, intellect, charm, she has it all. A few claps. Nods. My jaw stayed set. He wasn't done. And I'll say this too. He turned toward me. Not everyone gets to have a child like her. Some kids, well, they try, but they just don't have it. You know? The room started to quiet. I mean, look at her, and then look at. He gestured toward me with his glass. Well, you'll never amount to anything like her. I didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. I smiled. Raised my glass. Clink. And then I stood. Since we're handing out comparisons tonight, I said, I guess I'll go next. A few people laughed nervously when I stood. They thought maybe I was going to play along. Make a little self-deprecating joke. Be the good sport I'd always been. I didn't. I looked at my father, still holding his glass, the smile still fading, and then turned to the room. You know, Dad's right. I began, voice calm. I'll never be like Caroline. The room hushed. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the waitstaff froze. I let the silence sit. Let it settle like dust on an old family photo. I didn't go to Yale. I continued. Didn't get straight A's, didn't bring home trophies or scholarships that made the neighbors jealous. But I did build something. Something real. Caroline shifted in her seat. Her smile had that strained, performative tightness to it now. You all know I've been distant, I said, scanning the room. No wedding photos online. No big life announcements. No social media updates to keep you in the loop. I held up my glass. But I haven't been idle. People started murmuring, subtle whispers over the linen-covered tables. My mother's expression turned wary. Like she sensed a crack in the porcelain surface of her perfect day. I started a company 6 years ago, I said, with a loan from no one in this room. My eyes flicked to my father, then back to the guests. I worked 90-hour weeks, ate ramen for months, lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. And last year, we were acquired. Now I had their attention. A tech firm in Seattle. 8 figures. I won't bore you with the details. I swirled the champagne in my glass. But I will say this, I could have bought this venue. Twice. Dead silence. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because for years, I tried so hard to be seen. To be good enough. But nothing ever made a dent. Because it was never about what I did. It was about what I wasn't. I glanced at Caroline. And I'll admit, for a long time, I hated you for that. She blinked. Her groom shifted uncomfortably. But here's the truth, Caroline didn't ask to be put on a pedestal. She just climbed it because none of you ever gave me the ladder. A few gasps. A chair creaked. And still, I came today. I came to celebrate you, I said, turning toward her. Even paid for it. Now the room really froze. My father furrowed his brow. What? I smiled. Yeah. That anonymous benefactor who covered the bar tab, the lighting, the upgraded venue when the first one fell through? I raised my hand slightly. Surprise. My mother's hand went to her chest. Caroline looked like she'd been slapped. I kept my voice steady. I funded this wedding, not because I wanted recognition, but because I wanted to see how far you'd go pretending I wasn't in the room. I looked at my father again. Well, I think I've found the answer. My glass was still raised. My arm didn't tremble. I held the moment like I'd been rehearsing it for years. My father opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. He looked confused, like someone had changed the locks on a house he thought he owned. I told myself I'd keep it classy tonight. I continued, voice calm. But I also told myself I'd be honest. And there's one more truth I think this room deserves to hear. I paused. Long enough for Caroline to start shaking her head, subtle and tight. No, she said quietly, just loud enough for the table to hear. Please don't. I turned toward her fully. Charles, I said, looking at the groom. Mind if I ask you a question? He stiffened. You ever tell her about Megan? His face turned pale. You could hear silverware hit porcelain. Somewhere in the back, someone actually gasped. Caroline's mouth parted slightly, her eyes flickering toward her new husband. Funny thing about weddings, I said, people come from all over. And sometimes they bring secrets with them. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. Opened the screen. Held it up so only the head table could see. A photo, grainy, but unmistakable. Charles. A woman. Megan. A bridesmaid. Not just any bridesmaid, Caroline's best friend since college. The timestamp? 2 weeks ago. The location? A hotel bar in Chicago. Arms. Around. Each other. And that look? That wasn't platonic. Charles's mouth opened, then shut again. I didn't want to do this, I said. But Dad decided tonight was about public humiliation, so I figured, why not go all in? Caroline was silent now. Absolutely still. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her hand found the edge of the table and clung to it like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I told Megan not to come today, I said. Told her she should save herself the embarrassment. She didn't reply. Can't say I blame her. Charles looked like he was going to speak, but he didn't. He just looked at Caroline, whose eyes hadn't left me. I finally turned back to the rest of the room. Some of you may think I've just ruined the happiest day of my sister's life. But that's not true. I lowered the phone. Tucked it away. I didn't ruin anything. I just told the truth. And this family, God knows it's allergic to that. The room had gone so silent, it felt like a funeral instead of a wedding. A strange symmetry, really, since something was dying. Illusions, reputations, the myth of our perfect little family. All of it. My father still hadn't spoken. He just stared at me, lips tight, jaw clenched, like he was trying to compute how the boy he used to ignore had just taken control of an entire room without raising his voice. My mother looked like she was on the verge of fainting. Her hands clutched at her necklace like it might protect her from the shame crawling up her spine. Caroline sat frozen in her chair. She wasn't crying, but that was more terrifying somehow. Her stillness wasn't weakness. It was calculation. And I knew that look. She was rewinding time, checking the angles, trying to figure out if this was salvageable. I gave her nothing. You see, I said, it's not that I wanted to air all this out today. I didn't plan to come here and tear down the curtains in front of the guests. I really just wanted to celebrate. Quietly. Anonymously. I wanted to be the better man. I looked directly at my father again. But then you stood up. You raised your glass. And you just had to remind me who I was in your eyes. Less than a shadow to your daughter's light. I could feel every gaze in the tent shifting, recalibrating, like guests realizing they were in the wrong scene of the play. I took a breath. For years I bent over backwards trying to earn something that should have been given freely. Your approval. Your acknowledgement. Not even praise, just a little decency. But I see now, you were never going to give it. Someone in the crowd whispered, Jesus. I used to think if I just succeeded quietly you'd notice. You'd come around. But you didn't. So I gave up trying. I paused again. The DJ had long since stopped the music. Even the waiters had frozen in place. And in giving up, I built something of my own. I made peace with the silence. And it turns out, silence can be a very powerful thing, especially when you finally decide to break it. I stepped back slightly, glass still in hand. I looked down at it, like I was toasting something no one else could see. To the unseen, I said softly. To the ones who keep going even when no one's watching. To those who never got the applause but kept showing up anyway. Then I looked up. And to letting go. I set the microphone down on the head table. Not dropped, not slammed, just a quiet, deliberate placement. Like I was tucking away the last piece of a puzzle I never wanted to finish. The silence that followed wasn't shocked anymore, it was heavy. The kind of silence that makes people shift in their chairs, suddenly aware of how loud their own breathing is. A few guests avoided eye contact. A bridesmaid dabbed at the corner of her eye. The officiant stood motionless in the corner, holding a crumpled program like it might explain any of what just happened. And me? I was calm. I turned from the mic and faced the people I'd once called my family. My mother was trembling now, her mouth open but no words forming. My father, red-faced and stone-eyed, looked like a man whose world had just slipped an inch off its axis and was spinning slightly out of reach. Caroline hadn't moved. Her posture was perfect, her lipstick flawless, her bouquet still resting in her lap. But her eyes, they were glassed over. Whatever was happening inside her, it wasn't rage. It was reckoning. Then I looked at Charles. He couldn't even meet my gaze. Typical. I slid my hand into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a simple envelope. No name on it, no flourish. Just a white envelope with a printed return address in Seattle. I walked it over to the wedding planner, who stood off to the side, wide-eyed. Final payment, I said. Balance is 0. She took it slowly, like it might explode. I included a little extra. I added, they'll need it. And then I turned toward the exit. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout, or cry, or even look back. Just walked past rows of stunned guests in pastel suits and borrowed jewelry, through the draped opening of the tent and into the crisp evening air. Every step away from them felt like a step into my own life. One that wasn't about proving anything to anyone. Outside the tent, the world felt different. Quieter. The kind of quiet that feels earned. I walked across the gravel path toward the small parking lot at the edge of the venue. My car sat under the string lights like a waiting escape hatch. I could still hear the faint thump of muffled voices behind me. Confused, anxious, stunned. Maybe someone was crying. Maybe someone was angry. Didn't matter. I was done performing for their stage. I unlocked the door and slid inside, gripping the steering wheel not because I was angry, but because I needed something real to hold on to. I didn't leave just to hurt them. I left because I finally understood something most people don't realize until much later in life. Being unseen hurts, but being tolerated is worse. For years, I was the dutiful son. I sent gifts for holidays they forgot to acknowledge. I answered phone calls only when they needed something. When I finally moved away, no one asked why. When I missed Christmas the first time, they didn't check in, they just blamed it on work. They never saw the years I spent barely scraping by. Sleeping on couches. Eating dollar-menu meals while building a company no one believed in. They didn't notice the panic attacks, or the hospital visit I never told them about when I worked myself into exhaustion. They never asked? And I never told. Because some part of me thought, if I just get successful enough, they'll finally care. But when the money came, nothing changed. I became interesting to them, not important. That's when it hit me, they didn't care about me. They cared about status. Caroline gave them bragging rights. I gave them curiosity. Maybe even jealousy. But never love. And that's what tonight was really about. Not revenge. Release. The engine hummed as I pulled out of the parking lot, headlights sweeping over rows of manicured hedges. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I had done that enough in life. As I drove, the road stretched out like a ribbon of absolution. Whined through the open window, night air brushing against my face like a second chance. I kept thinking back to one night in particular. Years ago. The night I finally broke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a voicemail. I just wrapped a 14-hour day. My hands were shaking from too much coffee and not enough sleep. The office lights flickered as I packed my laptop, still hearing the echo of my pitch meeting where I'd been told, "You're not quite what we're looking for." Again. And then my phone buzzed. A voicemail from my father. "Hey. Caroline's on the news again. Graduated with honors, gave some speech. Thought you should see it. Anyway, let us know when you do something worth talking about." Click. That was it. Not "how are you?" Not "congrats on launching your startup." Just a reminder of what I wasn't. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Then I walked 3 blocks in the rain to my apartment, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the wall until the sun came up. That was the night something inside me stopped reaching. I stopped calling. Stopped hoping. Stopped pretending that if I just kept being loyal, they'd be loving. And do you know what? Nothing happened. They didn't reach out. Didn't ask if I was okay. Just carried on like I didn't exist, until they needed me again. Until Caroline's wedding. That's what made tonight easy. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd already mourned them years ago. I drove without a destination, the kind of aimless clarity you get only after severing something that's been poisoning you for years. Streetlights passed overhead like the ticking of a clock I no longer had to answer to. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Probably someone from the wedding. Maybe even Caroline. I didn't check. They'd be scrambling now. Trying to do damage control. Reframe the night. Find someone to blame. But I wasn't angry anymore. I felt light. You don't realize how heavy the expectations are until you finally set them down. That need to prove yourself to people who only ever see your flaws. It's exhausting. And when you finally stop running toward them, something incredible happens. You start running for yourself. For years, I thought family meant being there no matter what. No matter how invisible they made you feel. No matter how many times they forgot your birthday, or rolled their eyes when you mentioned your dreams. But I've learned something else. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who sees your bruises and still reaches out to hold your hand. It's the people who cheer for you when there's nothing in it for them. The first investor in my company wasn't my dad. It was my old college roommate Ben, who stayed up with me past midnight eating cold pizza while we mapped out pitch decks. The person who helped me move into my first office was Olivia, my neighbor who barely knew me but believed in what I was building. That's my family. They showed up. No conditions. No comparisons. And tonight, when I told the truth, I wasn't speaking just to the people under that wedding tent. I was speaking to anyone who's ever sat quietly at a table while someone else got all the cake and credit. The ones who were always told they were too sensitive, too quiet, too different. The ones who kept going anyway. I pulled into a quiet overlook just outside the city, one of those hidden spots where the skyline stretches like a painting and no one bothers you. I killed the engine, stepped out of the car, and just stood there. Wind tugged at the cuffs of my shirt. Distant sirens wailed, swallowed by space and night. And then I finally checked my phone. 14 missed calls. 1 from Charles. 2 from Caroline. The rest from unknown numbers I didn't recognize, but I could guess who they belonged to. The kind of people who'd ignored me for years and were now scrambling to figure out what just happened. I was about to turn it off again when I noticed one voicemail. Ben. I put the phone to my ear, expecting a joke or a "What the hell did you do?" But what I heard instead was his voice, soft and steady. "Hey, I don't know what happened at the wedding, just getting texts now, but whatever you said, I'm proud of you. You've carried a lot more than you ever let on. I always knew you were strong, but tonight, you showed them exactly who you are. And for what it's worth, I see you. Always have. Call me when you're ready." I stared out at the city lights, letting the words sink in. I see you. 2 decades of chasing that feeling, and it came not from my father, not from my mother, not even from my sister. But from someone who had no reason to say it except that he meant it. That's what stuck with me. Not the silence I left behind, but the voice that stayed. I never went back. Not to explain, not to gloat, not to see how the story ended without me. That chapter was written. I'd said what needed saying, not for them, but for me.